Shout for that kind of introduction. It's a real pleasure to be on this panel. My part in all of this is I'm a patent attorney based in Silicon Valley now. I was based in Japan for about 7 years, and I was originally in Washington, D.C. for a few years. So there's a lot of things that have happened over the last 20 years in our profession that have happened in the rest of the world. Due to the legal profession being self-protected, we have not adopted some of the manufacturing and quality control techniques that some of our clients have adopted, but now that's coming to us. So just for context, I thought it would be interesting to look at the world and how the world has changed. The topic of this program is robot attorneys. So we should look at how the rest of the world has dealt with automation and robots for just a few minutes. So some of you, how many of you are familiar with John Henry? John Henry, yes. So John Henry, this is a story from the mid-1800s from the United States. He was a laborer, and he worked in building tunnels with manual tools. He was, since he was a young child, he was helping his father, and he would build these tunnels with hammers and explosives and things like that. And sometime in the 1860s, something called a steam drill was invented. Steam drill would do what a manual laborer could do in a much faster time. So there's a famous story of John Henry digging a tunnel, racing against the steam drill in the mountains of West Virginia to build railroad tunnels that would go through the United States. And there was a competition between the steam drill and John Henry. John Henry actually won that competition, and then right after the competition he died of a heart attack. So then you could see industrialization happening, and it happened, that was kind of the first wave of the US industrialization, although I think it happened earlier in other countries. Now we fast forward to the mid-90s. I think Deep Blue, this is a familiar, is everybody here familiar with who Kasparov is? He's the chess champion of the world, and he had some matches against Deep Blue in the mid-1990s, and eventually ended up losing. And so we could see, not just in the area of manufacturing, the area also of strategy and decision making, the automation tools would defeat the best, again, the best in the world. And then Sedal and DeepMind, this was with Shogi or Go, I think, and then I believe DeepMind won something like 15 out of 16, and the 16th one was a draw. So you can see that's more of artificial intelligence, and a more difficult problem and a more non-intuitive approach where actual learning was involved. So this is just human versus machine outside of our profession. Now, what about management? What about the things that we've been helping our clients get patents for, suing other companies to protect their rights? This hasn't come to us the same way it's come more than 100 years ago to other professions. Elliot's going to talk about the first one a little bit, which is assembly line and specialization. It started over 100 years ago, where we went from the model of the production of an automobile being a bespoke skill to a more routine and eventually rote and commoditized skill. Then in the 1950s, after the Second World War, we started to look at techniques in Japan, Kaizen, which we call TQM, and going on to Lean Six Sigma. Quality control techniques used mainly outside of our profession to control the quality of mass-produced goods. Then we go on to other models that we use in the software industry, rapid prototyping, massive parallel processing, And then some of you have seen this famous video. Are people familiar with Philip Dick? Blade Runner? Blade Runner was a book written by Philip Dick, and it's been made and remade and remade into movies over the last 30 or 40 years probably. As a matter of fact, I think we're past the time of when Blade Runner took place, right? So the point was that there was a robot made of Philip Dick talking from the back. I think it was just a mess of wires, but it actually was the first attempt to have an AI tool try to carry out a conversation and look like a human being. So this was very interesting. So this is kind of the way that technology and automation has gone through the rest of the industry that we've been protecting. So hasn't yet happened to us, but it's going to be happening, and it's actually already happening. There's a graph that I don't have in this that I pulled up this morning called "Where are all the new U.S. attorneys and patent agents?" In case you haven't noticed, there's not many. There's a 5-year histogram of the number of U.S. patent attorneys from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 10 to 15, etc. years of experience. The 0 to 5 number is half that of each of the other numbers. There are not that many U.S. patent attorneys. In the meantime, the number of filings keeps going up. So what's happened? What's happened and what's happening? This is the road, and Richard Susskind wrote a book kind of at the start of the recession in 2008 called End of Lawyers. Great name for a book, right? And he kind of divided our profession into the types of jobs that we do and how those jobs could be disaggregated into different types of work. And this is kind of what we call the path to commoditization. Fortunately for us, there's a government which creates new laws, which creates new bespoke work every 5 or 10 years. But bespoke work would be like a trial attorney or somebody who works in a profession, and that work is very difficult to emulate. It requires a lot of creative thought. It requires some design and storytelling. And it requires something that cannot be easily standardized or systematized. So that would correspond to hourly billing rates. Standardized. Standardized is work that can be taught to the masses of attorneys. And this work, when it's taught to the masses of attorneys, can have best practices applied to it, so that we can come up with the best guess of how much, roughly speaking, the job should not exceed from an estimate perspective. And that's kind of how we moved from hourly into flat rates, caps and things like that. Systematized. This is when we start to connect our legal training with things like docketing, workflows, and other tools, and we can more accurately predict the type of work that needs to be done, and we can push it out to different professionals, paraprofessionals, outsourcers, and automated tools across the profession. Then we start moving more to a fixed and flat fee. So now we know exactly how much it's going to cost to file a new application, to draft a new application. So once we figure that out, we start bundling up services into more manageable tasks in terms of the fees. Filing a new application, we no longer will charge separately for how much it costs to prepare the assignment or the IDS, how much it costs to have the drawings done. We just know now that it costs X thousand dollars to package it all up, and we charge a fixed fee for that. So that's you still have attorneys and hanging around and partners signing things in the profession at this level, but your fixed fees come down. And then finally, commoditized, assembly line. You plug in an office action and the IDS comes out the other side. Completely commoditized, doesn't require much thought, just fill in the blank and check to make sure the initial data was right, sign the thing, and push it along. Yeah, you can have the slides or take a picture or whatever you want, but I think this is at least true from my perspective. But I remember that when I started drafting, you would have a single attorney who was taking handwritten notes, might have a tape recording that was sent to a transcription department, magnetic tape, right? And we really weren't using digital cameras that much for much of anything. We were just making sketches. If somebody wrote something on a marker board, you would have to have some kind of a CAD tool to have some draftsperson that you would pay a lot of money convert it into a drawing. There was a big draft. I was in DC at the time. There was a big industry of draftspersons and prior art searchers and this whole support business that was charging thousands of dollars for all of this. What would happen is you would, and going left to right, you would do your searching separate from the intake. And in the beginning, attorneys were being asked to do it. I was actually a searcher before I was working as a patent attorney in the dungeon of the U.S. Patent Office in the late 1990s. But it used to be about 4 weeks to 6 weeks, and typically search firms or attorneys would charge $1,000 to $2,000 to do manual and database search. You had to pay for all those databases. Even a lot of patent offices weren't completely digitized yet, so you had to do a lot of manual activity. Again, drawings, a lot of hand drawings, a lot of CAD, and then specification. Yes, we were typing it. Some attorneys were still handwriting it, handing it to some staff to convert their handwriting, which I don't know. The same software now as 5 years ago, you should be worried. If you can't think of a job other than your current one that you would be great at, worry and start taking an online course. Then
you're really true.
Well, this is in-house counsel telling us this. This is the company people telling us this. And then the last one. So okay, now
the audience.
Here's the don't worry part. If your patent specifications discuss aspects of the invention that weren't in the initial disclosure, you are using creativity. Don't worry. If you can describe the future market that your independent claims capture and the relative size of markets captured by each dependent claim, you're employing business knowledge. Don't worry. If you can explain how your drafting style has changed as a result of U.S. Federal Circuit decisions in the past 6 months, you are applying nuanced mental processes. Don't worry. If you usually realize better results the more time you spend asking questions of inventors and patent examiners, you are using interpersonal skills. Don't worry. And that last one is the one thing the few remaining professionals starting the profession, we have to train them to use. And then the last slide I had, I'm reading this book, I think is very interesting. Some of you, I should be finished with it, but I never finish anything. Anybody seen this book before? I don't know the author, and I'm not really anything specific, but a colleague recommended it to me. And what it talked about is how we're moving from the left brain world to the right brain world. And the last 6 notes I have as part of today's presentation is what's changing. A focus on functionality is changing to a focus on the design and the look and feel of things. Instead of thinking about legal arguments, we should be talking about telling the story. Instead of thinking about how a focused writing should be, we should think about the symphony and synthesis that occurs. Instead of thinking about logic, we should think about being persuasive and think about empathy. Instead of thinking about seriousness, we should think about play, always. And instead of thinking about accumulation of knowledge, we should think about what that knowledge means. So I was reading this and I was thinking that's really kind of what's going on and what's really left of our profession that's bespoke. And the more patent attorneys and the more professionals at all levels start to think about this, the more fun it's going to be, because there's already less new people entering the profession. So it still should be somehow fun for all of us. So that was my last note, and this was a very kind of general story, so I thank you for letting me give my part.